my notion of what their abuse is that I was concerned with.
Thank you. Yield back.
I think the gentleman from California, Mr. Huffman, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, forgive me for being a little bit cynical about the work of this subcommittee this morning, because I just see an awful lot of gaslighting and projection and performative partisan theater, ranting about dark money environmental groups while trotting out witnesses from the darkest of dark money right-wing groups in this hearing. Give me a break. Getting us started by climbing on a high horse, thesaurus in hand, and calling the Biden administration and CEQ Chair Mallory every name in the book because she dares to undo some really wrong-headed Trump administration policies, because she's trying to make sure we consider climate change and impacts to disadvantaged communities when we move forward with projects. You know, I'm old enough to remember during the 4 years of the Trump administration when we tried to do oversight, which apparently suddenly the Republican majority thinks is really important. And what we got back from the Interior Secretary when we wanted to find out if he was doing business still with his former oil and gas industry clients, because we unfortunately confirmed an Interior Secretary that was a lobbyist for the oil and gas industry. When we wanted to ask about that, we got pages and pages of fully redacted, empty calendar entries. We got nothing. But that was just fine with the Republican majority during the Trump administration, because they knew that that Secretary of Interior was doing the bidding of their puppet masters in the oil and gas industry. It's also rich to hear the chairman of the full committee wax sanctimonious about the Fiscal Responsibility Act, and apparently the CEQ chair is not being forceful enough in implementing the gimmicky NEPA reforms that were in that piece of legislation, and they were nothing more than gimmicks. While at the same time, our Republican colleagues are proceeding to tear the Fiscal Responsibility Act into tiny little pieces as they push our country to the brink of a government shutdown in violation of the agreement behind that legislation. So this is all a lot of partisan theater, and that goes for the discussion about the Lower Snake River dams as well. We know that our Republican colleagues recently said that the NIMS 2022 report was untethered from scientific standards and statutory authority. Mr. Sims added a rhetorical flourish saying that it was a house of cards, a flimsy house of cards that CEQ built. Well, you know, we've had 20 years of litigation over biological opinions on these Lower Snake River dams, and every single lawsuit has found that we're not doing enough to meet the standard of avoiding jeopardy, much less getting the salmon in the Columbia River Basin on a path toward recovery. So based on all of the science, it sure looks to me like this is more than a house of cards. It looks like seriously considering what these Lower Snake River dams are doing to salmon in the Columbia River Basin is inevitable. Certainly under the Endangered Species Act, and also if you give a damn about salmon, if you give a damn about tribes, if you give a damn about the dwindling orca populations in Puget Sound. Let me just ask Ms. Heaps, what am I missing here?
Congressman Huffman, I think you're right on the point. CEQ's undoing what happened in 2020 with the regs and taking the step forward to really implement NEPA for what we need today, to address climate change, to address environmental justice. And I'd also like to say that, you know, voices that are missing here, where's the tribal representation? I mean, that perhaps is the most stark point that hasn't been made yet, is that we have a government obligation to the tribes that they have treaty rights to these fish, and that is our number one thing that we have done wrong, and that should be the priority here, is centering the tribes and fixing these salmon runs so that they have their tribal treaty rights.
Thank you. The salmon in this basin are trending towards extinction, despite all the money that we've been spending on mitigation, correct?
Yes, that's true. The NESPERS actually, in fact, said extinction is imminent if we don't do something
So
now.
rather than just the usual thoughts and prayers we hear from our colleagues across the aisle, shouldn't we follow the science and do what we need to do if we care about salmon and tribes and all of the economic benefits? We heard the world would end if these dams came out, but aren't there a lot of economic considerations when it comes to salmon in the Columbia River Basin?
Yes, absolutely. And also, it would give, breaching the dams would give an opportunity to actually diversify the power system and actually increase reliability of the power system and open up additional recreational opportunities as well.
I thank the witness and yield back.
I think it's kind of rich of what we want, and to understand the Constitution is about the law. So I now recognize the chairman of the full committee.